Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be a big disappointment because I'm not young, I'm not pretty, and I'm not going to talk about food. Can you start my presentation, please? That would be nice. It's working. I'm going to talk about the human mind and the way in which it processes information. And before I do that, there are two things in advance that I have to do. I have to make you an apology because my presentation contains some very bad photoshopping and some bad jokes as well. But they're all in there to make a point. And there's one other thing I have to state in advance. Some of you, somewhere along the way, may think that I'm talking too fast. This is not true. You'll be listening too slow. Remember, everything is a matter of perspective. This is a picture of the human brain. And this is a picture of Colin Blunstone. And Colin Blunstone is a perfect example of how my mind works and yours too. Somewhere in the 80s, a long time ago, I heard a piece of music on the radio and I recognized the voice and the music, but I couldn't remember his name. And this was the pre-internet time, so I had no way of looking it up. And I just kept thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, and after about 24 hours, something popped into my mind, Andorra, which was the title of the song I'd heard. Still couldn't think of the name. And then about 5 or 6 hours later, I suddenly thought, Colin Blunstone. Now about 6 weeks later, again, I couldn't remember something, and I thought, what was the name of the singer again that I couldn't remember the name of? And after 3 or 4 minutes, it came to me, Colin Blunstone. Now, whenever I can't remember something, I think, Colin Blunstone. This is what I'd like to call the power of association. And the power of association is very strong. It's a reflex. You can't help it. You do it without wanting to. You can't even stop it if you want to. For example, reading is a very interesting form of association. When you're young, you learn shapes. Now you get the picture. Don't rush me. You get shapes. You learn to recognize sounds that go with shapes. They turn up to words. You see the word, and the word pops in your mind. And once you've learned how to read, you can't not read anymore. You have to do it. If I do this, you don't think blue, you think yellow, which is stupid because there's something blue popping up on the screen. Same happens when I do this. You think orange, you think blue, you think green. That's interesting, and you can't help it. Fair trade. We are a fair trade city, as you know. Now, association has some very funny side effects. There's recent research into fair trade, which states that if people see fair trade chocolate, they presume that it's healthier than normal chocolate and contains less calories. I'm not joking here, this is really true. So the point is, apparently, if you associate something with a certain word or something else, the associations that come with it go all the way back. So you think fair trade is good, then it also must be good in other ways, thus healthy, less calories. This is, you maybe think, a picture of Dordrecht. It's not. It's actually a picture of an invisible man standing in front of Dordrecht. And that may sound silly, but the point is, we are actually very good at seeing the invisible, and we're also very good at seeing things that aren't really there. You see a face. You can't help it. There's no face. It's just 2 dots in a line. And if I put the nose in, it's even worse. I showed this to my wife before, and she said, I'm sure you want me to see a clown, but do I need to see something else? No, she can't. This is a clown. Now, this all goes back to evolution. If you're a human in prehistoric times walking along the savannah, it's very handy if you know how to recognize lions, because you don't want to get eaten. Now, it would be very difficult if you'd have to see all of the lion to recognize it. So we've learned to recognize a lion if we only see a part of it. But that's also a reflex. So if you see a part of something and you don't see the rest, your brain automatically fills in the blanks. This is what magicians do. They put up a handkerchief, 2 pieces of rope sticking out on the side, and your brain automatically assumes there must be something in between. Let me tell you, there isn't, and that's why they fool you all the time. Now also, you could call this the power of patterns, because we are forced to recognize patterns, not just the real ones, but also the ones you can't see. If you come to a waterhole living on a savannah, and it's dawn and there's a lot of lions around, next time you come to the waterhole, and you think maybe it's a pattern, and you're beware of the lions, your chances of getting eaten go down. So it helps if you see patterns. It's even worse than that. It's better to see 3 lions that aren't there and miss the one that is. It's better to see 3 patterns that aren't there than to miss the one that you should have seen. So we are literally wired to see patterns, whether they're there or not. That's an interesting thought. I don't know whether you ever noticed, but people tend to say, this can't be a coincidence. When you are thinking, why the hell not? Because we're not built to see coincidences, we're built to see patterns. And we can't not see patterns. It's just not in our blood. This is Johnny Littlewood. He was a mathematician from England who had a very interesting theory about miracles. And he says miracles are actually very commonplace. And he explains it like this. A miracle is something with a chance of 1 in a million happening. Now there are events happening all the time. Let's say 1 event per second, but you don't see them because we are always looking for things that are unusual. We only notice the things that stand out. Now say, if 1 event is happening every second and you are active 8 hours a day, it takes you about 3 months to get 1 million seconds. So that means, and that's what John E. Littlewood says, that you have a right to experience at least 1 miracle every 3 months. So if a miracle happens to you, that's not miraculous. You have a right to it, and you should actually be disappointed if you don't get one every once in a while. We're also very good at not seeing things that are there. I'm not going into that, but it's actually possible not to see a gorilla walking in front of you. I say go to YouTube, look up the invisible gorilla, also look up the monkey business illusion. This is 4 of clover. You all know what that means. It means luck. Anybody has a lucky number in this room? 7, 9, 13, anyone? 1 here with 13, she's the exception. Someone for 4? Interestingly enough, a lot of buildings, and if you look quite well there, it's a photo of Berlin I took. This building has the 13th floor. A lot of buildings don't, which when you think about it is quite stupid because if you call it the 14th floor, it still is the 13th floor. But never mind. But if you'd walk into a hotel in Shanghai, you might see this. No 4th floor, no 14th floor, no floor 0, and no 13th floor. And why is this? Because the Chinese word for 4 sounds very much like death. So they don't like that number. There's also something wrong with 0, and they keep out the 13 because of the Westerners. If their hotels actually have a 4th floor, they make Western people sleep there. Now the interesting thing, of course, is that we tend to think that because we don't mind the 4 and we don't like the 13, this is a universal thing. It's not. I'd like to call that the power of culture. Culture is a form of collective association that we built up. And sometimes taboos are part of that. And I want to tell you a little story about chimpanzees. There's a nice experiment where they put 8 chimpanzees in a cage and a lot of bananas on a platform in the middle and a guy with a big garden hose on the side. And when the chimpanzees approached the bananas, they turned on the garden hose and all the chimpanzees got wet and they don't like that, so they got back. And they keep on doing that until all the chimpanzees know don't go near the platform or we'll all get wet. Then they take out one of the chimpanzees and they put a new one in. The new one thinks, bananas, and runs to the platform, is immediately grabbed by the other chimpanzees and beat up heavily because you don't go near the platform because otherwise we all get wet. Now if you keep on doing that until none of the original chimpanzees are in the cage, still if you take one out and you put a new one in, they'll grab him and beat him up because the platform is taboo. The power of context. Go ahead. Look at this picture. See anything funny? Now look at this picture. See anything funny? You didn't notice the party hat before. This is a matter of context because in that other context, the party hats, they belonged in that context. The party hats don't belong in this context. So that's interesting. So actually what your mind does is, your mind, based on context, predicts what's normal, what's not normal, and what you can expect. So actually, in a way, your brain manages your expectations based on context. I have to make a shortcut here to Marije Vogelsang, because she does that as well. If you put people in a tent when they're eating, which they're not used to, you take them out of the usual context, and you saw in her presentation that they start behaving differently. That's quite normal. One more context. See anything special? Of course not. A chicken, which was badly photoshopped in the left down corner, would stand out in the boardroom, however. So your mind is also managed by expectations caused by context. Although in the present situation, maybe in some banks, we had some chickens or chicken heads, but let's keep that to a different discussion. But it's even worse than this. It's not just that context manages your expectations, it also tells you what to do. And what's more, it also influences your behavior and your ability to do something. You all know this. If you want to walk across that wooden thing there, let's call it, well, whatever, wooden stumps. That's quite easy. And most of us, not Rainy the Bull, but most other people could do that in this room. Now, if I were to build that between this place where I took the photograph up to Spider Rock, somewhere in the United States, it would be still the same ramp that you'd have to walk along. But you wouldn't be able to do it because the context is different and the consequences are worse. And it's very simple when you do it in the low form, but if you have to do it up there, you can't. So you're influenced by context. This is Jean-Marc Monteil. He's a sociologist from France, advises the government, whatnot, and he did a brilliant experiment. He devised a problem that you could give in school classes, a geometrical problem, both in math classes and in drawing classes. And what happens is this. If you present that problem to a group of children in a math class, the boys do better than the girls. If you present that same problem, that exact same problem, in a drawing class, the girls do better than the boys. And the boys do better than the boys do on average in a math class. So, your ability to do things is actually influenced by what you expect. You expect to be able to do it or not, and influenced by context. So, why? Why am I telling you this, and why should you care? Well, first of all, I'm telling you this. Oops. Get back to you in a minute, Rainy. Well, first of all, I'm telling you this because I think it's very interesting, and secondly, because who passes up a chance to talk at TEDx? But if, like me, you're in marketing and communication, or if, like possibly you, occasionally you want to convince someone, it might be interesting to think about how people's minds work and what makes them tick. Now let's go back to Rainy for a while. You've probably noticed that when you meet someone that's disabled, you automatically presume, and don't deny this, that if they have a physical disability, there's something wrong with their heads as well. People do this. We do it automatically. We have to fight it. And there's a very good reason for that, and it's what I like to call the fair trade reflex. Your mind thinks, fair trade, good, healthy, less calories. Your mind thinks, wheelchair, limitation, not just physical limitation, must be a mental limitation as well. So it's a reflex. Now the good thing about that is you don't have to feel guilty because you can't help it. The other thing about this, though, that you have to be aware. And why do you have to be aware? Because if you're aware of the reflex, you can fight it and not step into the trap. The other thing, of course, you've noticed that actually Rainy de Boer is trying to monkey around with your mind. She's trying to change your association with wheelchair from pity to beauty, and doing quite a good job at that as well. And lastly, fair trade. Now say you're someone who tries to convince people they should use more fair trade products. And now say you've just discovered that people have a tendency to associate fair trade with healthy. Now if you advertise, you could try to strengthen that association by, for example, saying that farmers get a healthy price for their products. You could also say that that's not ethically appropriate. I have a view upon that, but we'll talk about that during drinks, and you can make your own mind up. But it's interesting to think about. So finally, before I say thank you, I hope you enjoyed these thoughts. And if tomorrow, next week, next month, something really, really, truly beautiful and unexpected happens to you, please feel free to think, I don't care what that Baaij guy said. This can't be a coincidence, because you never know, it really might be a miracle. Thank you.